Hi, it's Anne-Marie from Charmed Life Therapy. Oh, I don't know. Sometimes I regret jumping in and making a video after a break to do with Baldoni and Blake because next thing there's a whole load of things that happen on the docket and I feel this mortal responsibility to keep up. She's now after our video the other day talking about sanctions against Jamie Heath. She's now after sanctions against Melissa Nathan for again basically not providing her with enough evidence to make a case and complaining about the redactions that Melissa Nathan has still made on the evidence that she provided Blake Lively. And I'm still a little bit on the fence about Melissa Nathan and Jed in a sense, because I think many of us feel like, they possibly are capable of some of these slightly nefarious things that they are accused of. And while we don't necessarily believe that they've done it in the Wayfarer case, or certainly that the Wayfarer people haven't asked them to do it, I think many of us are a little bit, not too sure about these people. They may not, they're not doing it here, but whether or not they wouldn't do it elsewhere, I'm not quite sure. But there's a few little things that have popped up. I think we're going to start seeing some more unsealings, or certainly Wayfarer said we have no problem with unsealing certain things, kind of to do with what was originally sealed was who Blake was going to say, the names she could come up with in terms of who could give evidence towards her case. So her initial list has been unsealed, and that's a list that still included people like Ryan's. But I do believe possibly we're going to get the more up-to-date version of that shortly unsealed. But on that list, there is like people like Ryan's niece on there, Brandon Sklenar is on there, Jenny Slate and Isabella Ferrer are on there. Oh, and those people are, it is like saying, could testify to the SH allegation aspect of it. And it's like, well, they could only testify to what Blake has told them, basically. So there's a long old list of people, but I don't know if it's worth going through because, as I say, I think it was superseded by other things. But what we do have now is Jen Abel's. There's more clarity given to Jen Abel's counterclaims against Stephanie Jones, and it's not particularly looking great for Blake and Stephanie Jones through the revelation of this, because it's become clear what Jennifer Abel went through at that time, running up to events, and at the time her phone was taken off her in late August, was it the 21st? But I thought it might be useful to go through this, and I know other people have, but I suspect I might kind of be able to bring a little bit of value to it in some way. I want to kind of read through it and take it at face value and not as an attack on Jen Abel, because I'm certainly not doing that. But I think it kind of can give us some valuable tips about how we handle our life, because I think I'm going to work through it because I've only read it once quickly, as I try not to give these things too much weight before I tackle them. But I think there's like question marks of I know, like when Jen Abel's point of view was first being put across, and this business of not having control over her iCloud and doing anything about it. And my first query was, why did she kind of leave it? Knowing who had her information in their hands and knowing how quickly she was locked out of certain things, I've always had a bit of a question mark in my mind as to why she didn't do certain things. And I think this document kind of is going to detail what she did do, but I think there's still some question marks. And I don't want to address it in a way that's saying she should have done this and she should have done that. But I think as a document, if that's the entirety of what happened, and I'm not sure it is because I'm sure other things went on that aren't in this document. But if we kind of look at the document and just take it as face value about what a certain person did in light of XYZ happening to them, it might actually give us inform our own lives a bit. And because it's interesting, because I dealt with a client recently about procrastination. And it can be this way even when we've had bad things happen to us. There's a lot of it that we don't want to touch, that we don't want to tackle, that we hope will go away on its own, or resolve itself on our own because we don't know where to start with it, or it feels too hard, or whatever it, or we don't want to ruffle feathers in some cases, whatever it may be. And I think that this document kind of puts me in mind of a lot of that, that it's like she did do a lot and she went through a lot, but I'm not sure in hindsight whether it was proactive enough, the steps she took. And I don't know whether that will go against her legally in any way, because with Lyman we do get this sense of when people come to him and say, well, they didn't do this and they didn't do that, or they did do this and they did do that, he tends to go, well, what did you do? You know, you could have XYZ. And he can sometimes be a bit like that. So I don't know if, I mean, it's quite shocking to read what Stephanie Jones did to her, and it's certainly terrible, and it casts her and Blake in a certain light. But on the same hand, we all have this duty in life to kind of protect ourselves as much as possible, and we often fail to do that for ourselves. And I hold my hand up to that. You know, absolutely. I've done plenty of that in my life. So I thought we could maybe run through that document. But what I'll quickly do is there's a new letter just from Kevin Fritz on the Wayfarer side of things. So let's just kind of quickly look at that. All right, just blow it up a little bit. So this was October 31st. So dear Judge Lyman, as counsel for Wayfarer Studios LLC, Justin Baldoni, Jamie Heath, etc., etc. Pursuant to Rule 1D of Your Honour's individual rules and practices, the Wayfarer parties respectfully request an extension of time to and including November 6th, in which to respond to Blake Lively's motion for sanction concerning a video of Jamie Heath's wife shortly after the birth of their child. The motion, docket 889. Given that Ms. Lively improperly filed the motion as a letter motion, the current date for opposition to the motion is November 3rd. So kind of you ask yourself, did they file it in that way not to give them adequate time to make a response? Because that's what the way the rule works, depending on what you file it as. In accordance with Rule 4C of Your Honour's rules, although we requested that Ms. Lively consent to the extension sought herein, she refused without explanation. The motion seeks unwarranted and draconian relief, an order, 1, compelling Mr. Heath to produce all video footage depicting the birth of his child, which was never previously requested or ordered to be produced, and 2, precluding Mr. Heath from testifying about the nature of the image shown to Ms. Lively and the circumstances relating to showing the image, which is disputed in brackets. The preclusion of evidence for failure to respond to a discovery request is a drastic remedy. Steinman versus Final Concepts, Inc. Report and recommendation adopted, blah, blah, blah. Indeed, precluding certain evidence, such as Mr. Heath's testimony about the image at issue, I suspect, because they're saying here the circumstances relating to showing the image, which is disputed. So I'm imagining that Jamie Heath in his mind, his version is that he presented that image or that the video clip to Blake Lively in an entirely different context. I imagine there'll be words to the effect of there was some other conversation around it saying, oh, we've got an idea in mind about what we want it to look like, or Justin has said something to Blake, or vice versa, that because Jamie has said something along the lines of Justin's kept asking me to show this to you. I imagine Justin has had a conversation with Blake about what he wants Jamie to show her. So I don't think this PORN clip that that Blake likes to think of it as came out of the blue. I think that will be the conversation around that. Indeed, precluding certain evidence, such as Mr. Heath's testimony about the image at issue, can be deemed dispositive of his defence. Therefore, the motion should not have been filed as a letter motion merely pertaining to discovery, but as a regular motion on notice. Had Ms. Lively followed the proper procedure, Then, pursuant to local civil rule 6.1a, the Wayfarer parties would have had 7 days to respond thereto. In all events, the Wayfarer parties should be accorded more than 2 business days to address the serious allegations contained in and the disturbing and drastic relief sought by the motion. So the party's next scheduled appearance before the court is December 9th. So that had popped up in the meantime. This here is Blake's initial disclosures where she's saying who can provide evidence as such. And like I said, this has been superseded by other things, but you got Ryan here who can testify to alleged, and we know Ryan's not testifying now because he's not being deposed and such. So we've got Leslie Sloan, Stephanie Jones, Justin, Jamie, Steve Sarowitz, and all of the various business Wayfarer LLC agency group, Jen Abel, Melissa Nathan, Jed Wallace. Interesting to see, in the CRD, he was listed as taking part in the SH against it. He's not being, it's not being detailed here that he can testify about the SH allegations. Street relations. So you got Charles Babcock in there, Brian Friedman, the person most knowledgeable of Liner Friedman, Charles Babcock himself, Tara Hanks, who is Wayfarer president, more Wayfarer staff, and Matthew Mitchell, Vice President of Talent at JonesWorks, Matthew Gibson, Director of Talent at JonesWorks. He's the guy that worked kind of hand in hand with Jen Abel at JonesWorks. So you've got all the people kind of Colin Hoover, Brandon Feekins, professionally known as Brendan Sklenar, and it does say here that the party's alleged conduct was sexually discriminating, harassing, and other inappropriate or unwelcome actions, blah, blah, blah. Jenny Slate, the same. Isabella Ferrer, the same. And we know Isabella Ferrer didn't work on set at the same time as Blake. So these people can only testify, surely, to what they heard secondhand from Blake and any alleged distress, I guess. Alex Sachs, film producer on It Ends With Us, the Sony executive, Ange Gianetti, Sony staff, Josh Greenstein, president of Sony, Warren Zavala, her agent, Patrick Whitesell, part of WME as well, Danny Greenberg, Justin's agent, Don Saladino, the trainer, Candice Owens, Perez Hilton, Whitney Fransway. I'm not sure who that is, Whitney Fransway, or I might know her by a handle, but I don't know by this name. Adam Investigations Council, I imagine that's those that are doing the workplace. Are they the guys that are doing the workplace investigation on Justin's behalf? I'm not sure there. There's like Lively's driver, because there was that alleged incident that Blake said something about her driver was aware of Justin making her feel uncomfortable over something or other. Was that when, I think that was when there was alleged talk of, it's disputed, he was saying that a woman had taken advantage of him and she kind of turned it around the other way, I think, as made it a consent issue or something, that it was him that didn't ask for consent, something like that. I think that was the story at the time. So Claire Ayoub is here, Blake's makeup artist, Vivian Baker, Emily Baldoni, and she can apparently testify to the sexually discriminating, harassing, and other inappropriate or unwelcome actions. Production designer on It Ends With Us, all the Betty Boo stuff. Alexis Bledel. I think they're all here. All of the Traveling Pants girls are here, I think, from what I remember. So to the party's alleged conduct, complaints or discussions about the work environment. So why was she in touch with all the Pants girls over this? And at what point? So Todd Black, who was brought in on her behalf, Scooter Braun, Anne Carroll, her hairstylist, the intimacy coordinator, Daily Mail staff, Maximum Effort staff, Betty Boo's staff, Ari Emanuel, Blake Brown staff, America Ferrera, that's another Traveling Pants, Taryn Fisher, author and Colleen Hoover's friend, Kirsty Flower, more Sony exec Gigi Hadid. So these are all the people, I guess, that she was spinning the tale to, the story to. Miss Lively's assistant, additional content. All right, okay. Natasha Heath, Christy Hall, the screenwriter, Hugh Jackman, Jonesworks LLC, Carolina Hurley, SVP Entertainment Crisis at TAG, the Skyline Agency, Rosa Kalantari, another assistant of Blake's there, Molly Caro, makeup artist, Robin Lively. She can testify to the sexually discriminating, harassing, blah, blah, blah. New York Times reported that he was the one that worked in tandem with Megan Toohey. Mr. Baldoni's assistant, he can testify to the SD. I don't know what we're calling this, what we're supposed to say anymore. Sexually discriminating. Dervla McNeese at TAG, Adam Monshine, who's already come out, hasn't he, and said that he did, he supports Justin. Film producer there, Ahmed Musial, Sarah Nathan, Melissa Nathan's sister, who's a journalist. Alex Newstadter, who played the young Atlas, he contested. She was telling him about the actually discriminating things, presumably. No More, the organisation that got financial backing through it, I think. Jenny Slate's manager, Steve Sarowitz's company, Velocity, Liz Plank, another driver of Blake's, Sony Pictures Marketing, Jack Pan. Another attorney there, Investigation Council. Oh, they might be, are they the guys that were doing Justin's investigation? I'm not sure there, I could be wrong. Yeah, Jamie Reynolds, Mr. Reynolds' niece. So Tamara Reynolds, Ryan's mother. So like I say, this might have changed in the meantime, some of this, but I just thought, as soon as it's popped up, might as well. The chief financial officer at Wayfair Studios apparently knows it all as well. And the head of HR, Cynthia Barnes Slater, she was having trouble getting her at one point, wasn't she? She was the subject of difficulty, I think, trying to serve her at one point or another. So Mr. Baldoni's assistant, Taylor Swift is there, Justin Greystone Blake's agent, manager, I think, isn't it? God, I know way too much about this, don't I, at this point? I'm sure we all do. So another intimacy coordinator, Amber Tamblyn. So you've got the full crew of the Travelling Pants sisterhood. Another reporter at the New York Times, More Blake Brown, Beauty People, Megan Toohey, chairperson at Sony. I'm not going to try and say that. I nearly tried to say that. I will say Tony Vensicara, James Vituska, the usual suspects. But yeah, there you go, basically. So that I think we will get the newer version of that, basically, where some more, maybe some of these are missing or more are added. But I think Taylor Swift will take, I don't know. She brought Taylor into it, though. More proof she brought Taylor into it. So let's hop to this then. So this is Jen's counterclaims. So I'll try to go through it fast. So she was always resident in Beverly Hills because there's more location dispute through this as well. So Stephanie Jones is an all times relevant, was an individual who lived in Greenwich, Connecticut. Plaintiff counterclaim defendant is and at all times relevant, was a Delaware limited liability company with its principal place of business in New York. None of jonesworks members are citizens of California. There exists, and at all times herein mentioned, there existed a unity of interest between jonesworks and Jones, such that any individuality and separateness has ceased, and jonesworks is the alter ego of Jones, the one and the same. At all relevant times, each of Jones and jonesworks was the agent, servant, employee, employer, joint venture, blah, 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 operating and acting within the purpose and scope of said agency, service, employment, joint venture, partnership, and or alter ego. So each of Jones and Jones works has rendered substantial assistance and encouragement to the other, acting in concert, knowing that its conduct was wrongful and or unlawful, and each of Jones and Jones works has ratified and approved the acts of the other. So this court has original jurisdiction of the claims for relief asserted in this counterclaim, because the matter in controversy exceeds the sum or value of $75,000 exclusive of interests and costs, and no counterclaim defendant is a citizen of the same state as the counterclaim. It does get rather confusing, this, when it comes down, because it's so complicated now over who's suing who, isn't it? So Jen Abel is like a defendant and a counterclaimant because she cross-complained. So let's not get too bogged down in the legal jargon. So all of them systemically and continuously conduct and solicit business within New York and have availed themselves of the privileges of conducting business in the state of New York. So they're kind of trying to make sure it's tied to New York and what's going on there, rather than, because I think her original contract, if I'm right, Jen Abel's, it's either one way or the other. When her contract, I think, was it originally under California law, and then when it was amended later down the line, sometime later, the choice of law switched. It was either that way around or the other way around. I can't quite remember it. So now they're trying to clean this up, I guess. So this court may exercise personal jurisdiction over the counterclaim defendants because all of them transact and solicit business within the state of New York and have committed the tortious acts described herein within the state of New York. A venue is proper in this district because a substantial part of the events or omissions giving rise to these claims occurred in this district, and because the counterclaim defendants are subject to personal jurisdiction in this district. Jonesworks is a well-known New York-based public relations firm founded by Stephanie Jones, who is its CEO. So long known within the public relations industry for her disarming Southern twang, brass-knuckle tactics, and high turnover of clients and employees, Stephanie Jones has had a successful career in the entertainment industry. So she represents The Rock, Jeff Bezos, Lauren Sanchez, or she did, these people, Venus Williams, Tom Brady, and Chris Hemsworth. I mean, no matter what comes out of this, I think Stephanie Jones is going to be struggling, isn't she, too? I'm not sure why anybody would pick Stephanie Jones, given how she seems to treat the people within her sphere at this point. So Stephanie Jones is married to Jason Hodes, who is a partner at William Morris Endeavor, Hollywood's most powerful talent agency. So that makes them a bona fide Hollywood power couple. When Jones poached Abel, she was an up-and-coming star publicist, a storied 70-year-old of this RNCPNK, a storied 70-year-old public relations arm of Interpublic Group, which was a publicly traded multinational marketing behemoth. So she departed there, where she'd worked for nearly 12 years and held the title of vice president. So in or around late spring 2020, during the height of COVID, Jones, through a recruiter, reached out to Abel via LinkedIn about joining Jonesworks. And though she was not actively looking for a job, she liked the idea of a higher salary and, critically, the opportunity to lead her own team. So she wanted to expand a bit by the sounds of it. And I think she realised there was a risk involved, but I guess it was prestige and stuff, wasn't it, that was the driving motivation. Sometimes it's, you have to trade one devil for another, don't you, to get somewhere. When Abel announced her intention to join Jonesworks, she was met with a parade of concern from across a professional network. So well-respected public relations across the entertainment industry reached out to caution her against working for Stephanie Jones. They warned her that Jones had a well-deserved reputation for treating people horribly. Jones had recently become embroiled in a dispute with another public relations firm that's dealing its clients using deceptive and unscrupulous means. But the new opportunity, and not personally familiar with Jones or Jonesworks, Abel decided to make the jump in spite of the admonitions from her peers. And I think this is why this document is quite, like I'm always looking for the value in this case. And I think this is what I feel about this document. It's a lot of lessons we can learn from it, because there's so many times along this way that this whole scenario might not have happened if people had have just made a single decision at a crucial point. And that's very true about life itself. So here she's got everybody saying, don't do this, you're going to regret it. And it's like, do you listen to other people or your intuition, or are you listening to your ego, which says, oh, go for it, it'll be all right, let's not think about all those things people have said, or any like internal collywobbles we might have over it, more money, more prestige, your own team, getting exposed on maybe a more national level, meeting a few starrier people. You wouldn't, and this is kind of what's going on all through this case, I think. So on or about July 9th, Abel was hired by jonesworks as vice president, her mandate being to oversee jonesworks' talent department and grow its nascent Los Angeles office, which at the time had only 4 employees. So that's quite a pull, isn't it? It's like, go work in LA and build that office up. You're going to take it from 4 employees upwards. It would be quite a pull, wouldn't it? In terms of, oh, that sounds quite exciting, even if there's some drawbacks to it, doesn't it? In connection with and as a condition of her employment, Abel signed a non-disclosure and intellectual property rights and non-solicitation agreement. So that was the 2020 employment agreement. Abel was not represented by counsel in connection with the negotiation or execution of the 2020 employment agreement. And I think this is where we all often will fall down. We will often sign things or agree to things that maybe we should have had somebody else look over. And perhaps, even if she still wanted this opportunity, given what her friends had said, maybe she could have at this. And when I'm saying all this, I'm not saying, oh, I'm this perfect, this is exactly what I do. I'm actually saying this is what we're all kind of guilty of. And Jen Abel, in a way, is the everyday girl in this scenario of this case, if you like. So I think that's why it's interesting to have this little discussion around if this is her playbook on what happened, So she didn't have anybody look at that for her, this 2020 employment agreement. Had they looked at it, they might have flagged up some things to her, I think. So it provided that Abel was an at-will employee whose employment was exclusive to jonesworks during the period of her employment. It also contained a confidentiality clause, pursuant to which Abel was required to maintain the confidentiality of and not disclose confidential information, as the term is expansively defined therein. Provision. So however confidentiality is detailed in that document, it sounds like it's over and above what might be termed normal. So it's like it's kind of insinuating that Stephanie Jones had a bit of a mania around what confidentiality looked like. So these terms defined therein, provisions purporting to restrict Abel's ability to speak truthfully about her experiences at jonesworks, and a host of restrictive covenants, including non-competition and non-solicitation covenants. So I think it's like I said, maybe somebody had looked at that for her, they might have been going, oh, red flag here, you know what I mean? But we've all done, it's like I say, we have all done this thing where we've had all these red flags and signals, but we've like brushed it under the carpet because shiny object syndrome, isn't it? The 2020 employment agreement also contained a California choice of law provisions providing that it has been made and shall be interpreted in accordance with the laws of the state of California without regard to conflicts of law principles. So that's it. It started in a California choice of law provision. That was my confusion, starting in California. The jurisdiction thing is really hard for me to keep straight. Within a few weeks of Abel's onboarding, JonesWorks faced a mass exodus of employees in its New York office. While Abel was understandably concerned, Jones assured her that all the departing employees were horrible at their jobs and would be fired regardless. Little did Abel know that turnover of that magnitude was typical at JonesWorks, which routinely faced large-scale departures by disgruntled and demoralized employees. What Abel quickly realized was that morale amongst JonesWorks employees was outright abysmal, that such departures were invariably acrimonious, and that departing employees and current employees alike were extremely tight-lipped and fearful of discussing their experience at JonesWorks. And that is what happens when there's no real HR department or anybody you can go to and speak about. It becomes like this hive of gossip, doesn't it? It becomes incredibly toxic. I worked at a place, yeah. I'm sure the job that I class is the most toxic that I only really had one toxic employment experience and I didn't stay there, but I'm just trying to recall if there was a HR office in that environment, and I don't think there was. Abel observed that morale among JonesWorks employees was inversely correlated with physical proximity to Jones. So anybody that was near her tended to have been, well, it's like when you're next to a narcissist, isn't it? It's like it infiltrates your energy. Thus, the Los Angeles office was generally a more positive environment than the New York office. Abel was also surprised to learn that despite its size, JonesWorks lacked any human resources department or dedicated human resources personnel. Jones instead relied on business affairs personnel, like henchmen, aren't they, and her various chiefs of staff to handle any personnel-related matters, in part due to the lack of a HR department or grievance reporting structure and fear of backlash from JonesWorks had a toxic workplace culture in which employees, lacking an outlet or meaningful recourse, constantly gossiped and complained amongst themselves and leaned on senior employees for solutions to workplace issues. Unlike most workplaces, JonesWorks also lacked written internal policies, including regarding the usage of electronic devices or an employee handbook. So it's clear, isn't it, that Jones wanted that freedom to be able to make it up as she went along, really, regarding her employees and what they did and what was available to them. At no point during Abel's employment did she see, hear about, or sign anything of the sort. So the only terms governing Abel's employment were those set forth in her employment agreement. So because PR jobs require extensive mobile phone usage, public relations firms often assume the cost of their employees' phones and phone usage. JonesWorks was no exception. While Abel had an Android, Jones offered to switch her to a JonesWorks issued iPhone, which required that she port her existing long-time phone number to the JonesWorks company phone plan. And again, this is a little bit of a red flag, isn't it? Because I mean, for me, I would want to go Android. That would be like, oh, no, I don't want to go to an iPhone. And it's just like, because I've always had like Androids and that, but the phone number thing, as silly as it sounds, a phone number is very personal to us, isn't it? We do tend to hang on, in the early days of mobile phones, I think we switched them like willy-nilly, our phone numbers. We didn't really mind, but we soon learned it was better to keep the mobile phone number that you could remember and such, and not to have the hassle of changing things. I would have been very wary about sticking my private phone number onto the JonesWorks company phone plan. But it says here Abel had no problem with this so long as she could retain ownership of her phone number and bring it with her should she leave JonesWorks. But it's like somewhere in your mind you should be getting like a little intuitive thing that says, oh yeah, but if they own that phone and if they own the phone number and they own the device, how safe is anything private that I have on here? You would hope you had a little warning light go off, wouldn't you, really? But again, it's like we do tend to overlook things or look on the bright side of things, don't we? Although JonesWorks owned the physical device, it was configured with Abel's personal Apple ID and populated with all of her personal email accounts, photos, text messages, third-party apps. Abel had no concerns about using her JonesWorks issued cell phone freely and as her sole mobile device, as such practices are common in her industry where pay can be low, and neither Jones nor anyone else at JonesWorks advised her against doing so. JonesWorks did not have any internal policies that prohibited such use. So JonesWorks didn't seem to be worrying about them using their devices for private things. And there were no policies that prohibited or such use, gave it the right to monitor such use, or divested employees of a reasonable expectation of privacy in relation to such use. But again, it's a tricky argument, isn't it? Because again, Lyman could look at this as, well, yes, she had no agreement, but then you could have asked why there was no agreement, and can I do this, and there is a little bit of personal responsibility, accountability again. And I think this is what I wanted to make clear during this is always be aware of protecting your own best interest. Never just assume somebody else has your best interests in mind. We do have some accountability to ourselves to protect ourselves. We walk around in this life assuming people have the same moral code that we do, and clearly they don't, and not everybody is going to be a good actor. They talk a lot about bad actors in this lawsuit. There's not so much talk about good actors. So Abel had no reason whatsoever to believe that JonesWorks' ownership of the physical device would or could in any way compromise her right to privacy in the personal data or accounts stored on or accessible from it. JonesWorks would not have any right to access or monitor, for example, her personal email accounts, text messages, photos, or bank accounts. In addition, Abel separately paid for additional storage for her personal data, or data, if you're American. Notwithstanding the continued large-scale departures from the JonesWorks New York office, Abel quickly became a leader of the California operation. Within 2 years, Abel had grown the Los Angeles headcount from 4 to 12. All the while, Abel wore an array of hats, working tirelessly without a commensurate increase in compensation. So around about November 22nd, 2021, JonesWorks required Abel to enter into a modified employment agreement, changing her employment from at will to a contractual term, adjusting her title and compensation, subjecting her to a variety of novel restrictions intended to deter her from leaving JonesWorks and inhibiting her ability to remain in her chosen field if she were to do so. Again, that's red flag, red flag, red flag, isn't it? Again, it was an opportunity missed, wasn't it, to get something down in writing or insist on it being reworded and not signing things, not being coerced. I get the sense of Jen Abel kind of being a bit of a girl that goes with the flow, that doesn't like to ruffle feathers, that likes to be friends with everybody. And that is many of our habits in life that I would have been like that. I'm starting to get really comfortable with not everybody liking me and certain people being intimidated by me, not out of anything I'm doing, but I know for me, there's certain things about me that people find intimidating, even without me saying a word or doing anything. It's just something in my presence that gives people a certain aspect about me. And I think I was always making up for that and trying to be the good girl and the nice girl and do everything for anybody that was asked of me, and often threw myself under the bus. And I think what I get here with Jen Abel is this sense of, I just want to be everybody's friend. I just want to be liked. I don't want to make waves. I just want to do my job and build my team and do what lights me up and the rest of it. But she's not actually spotting all these things that were really quite dangerous, really, as a result of that. And look where she's ended up. So she wasn't misrepresented by counsel in connection with the negotiation or execution of the 2021 employment agreement. So this agreement, like its predecessor, contained an expansively drafted confidentiality provision as well as a host of restrictive covenants, including non-competition and non-solicitation covenants. So it would have made it very difficult for her to leave, because she could be accused of poaching or any number of things, or setting up in competition and the like of it. So unlike the 2020 employment agreement, the 2021 version contained a New York choice of law provision providing as follows. This agreement and the performance of the parties' obligations hereunder will be governed by and construed in accordance with the laws of the state of New York without giving effect to any choice of law principles. So at all times during Abel's employment at jonesworks, Abel was a resident of the county of Los Angeles, was based out of the Los Angeles office, and performed the overwhelming majority of her work within the state of California. Abel has lived and worked in California for the entirety of her adult life. Since graduating from college, she's maintained virtually no connection to the state of New York, not lived there, had a residence there, performed any significant amount of work there, or even traveled there more than a handful of times. She was at all times considered a California resident, employee, entitled to the protections of the laws of the state of California, apart from infrequent business travel. She performed no work for jonesworks in the state of New York. So it's clear that jonesworks required Abel to agree to a New York choice of law because it wanted the ability to bind her to restrictive covenants such as non-competition and non-solicitation covenants that would be void ab initio in California, and to deprive Abel of the protections of California substantive law. So again, it's red flags, isn't it, really? By Abel's second year, Jones appeared to be deteriorating. Abel began to have increasing concerns about Jones' mental stability and ability to manage client and employee relations. Around this time, Jones started making FaceTime calls to Abel and other employees at notably odd hours. These communications frequently tracked through the night and into the next morning, suggesting that she had not been sleeping at all. Concurrently, and likely relatedly, Jones became noticeably more paranoid and irascible, often accusing Abel and others of plotting against her. It became more challenging to communicate with Jones, settle her nerves, or even track her train of thought. I mean, not sleeping it isn't given its due credit as something that will completely mess with your equilibrium. If you're not sleeping, you will quite quickly become neurotic and paranoid. So due to extremely draconian NDAs, Jones's threats and the climate of fear pervading past and present jonesworks employees and clients alike, Jones' worst excesses were largely hidden from view until in or around May 2024, when Puck reported that Sanchez and Johnson had dropped Jones as their publicist. And I think that his name's gone out in the head, but the journalist related to Puck is somebody that Stephanie Jones has a real beef, possibly as a result of this. I can't just think of his name, it's gone out in my head. I think it might pop up later on. While these were among the most prominent and publicly reported departures, a cascade of jonesworks clients began cutting ties with Jones, especially after word spread that Business Insider was contacting Jones's former and current clients and employees about a forthcoming article about her sordid behaviour. So May 8th, 2024 is when the Stephanie Jones leaks website went live, along with an X.com account, a Facebook page, a Reddit account, and a Pinterest page. These platforms disclosed a litany of alarming allegations about Jones' behaviour and business practices, many concerning Jones' mistreatment of jonesworks employees and clients. And it's like Stephanie Jones is trying to pin this, at least in part, on tag. Isn't she trying to prove that? So Abel had no involvement of any kind in Stephanie Jones' leaks. These revelations caused a firestorm in Hollywood, resulting in a surge of negative publicity regarding Jones, including the publication of the Business Insider piece entitled "Who's Afraid of Stephanie Jones?" See Katie Warren and Jack Newsom. Katie Warren's being pulled into this case, hasn't she, as well? So who's afraid of Stephanie Jones? Business Insider August 17, 2024, and there's a link to it there and talking about the various clients that she lost. So Abel was not responsible for that piece and learned of it for the first time from Jones herself in or around late May, early June 2024. The Business Insider piece shed more light on the real Jones. Always a volatile personality, Jones had become noticeably more paranoid, erratic, and cruel in recent years. And that story also shed light on the toxic workplace Jones had fostered at jonesworks. at the office, Jones would regularly, it's like terrorism tactics, this, regularly turn on deafening music so that she could berate her employees free from scrutiny. I don't think there was one day in the office that someone wasn't crying, said a former employee. And that's what I found in this toxic workplace I worked in, that there was always somebody crying somewhere, or someone that had gone off sick with stress. Even like 21-year-olds who are usually quite resilient. Jones also pried into her employees' private lives without invitation. As detailed by Business Insider, when employees called in sick, Jones would FaceTime them to confirm they were actually sick. In at least one instance, an employee who had taken a personal day to attend a funeral received a FaceTime call from Jones during the ceremony. Jones was apparently suspicious of his whereabouts. I mean, I hope he didn't pick up the damn FaceTime call. I wouldn't know. As discussed above, but disclosed publicly by Business Insider, turnover rates at jonesworks were extraordinary. These departures included not only junior employees, who often left after less than a year, but also senior executives who managed client accounts. Jones seldom allowed them to go amicably, often enlisting attorneys to threaten and intimidate them into agreeing not to disparage Jones. So there kind of comes a point, doesn't there? I guess for many people, it's whether they leave when they've not been there long and risk that ire, or whether if they've been there some time and this has been gradually creeping up, you kind of get conditioned by this sense that it's not safe to leave, don't you? And you start thinking that you're stuck there for life in essence. In April 2023, The Rock dropped jonesworks after clashes between Jones and Johnson's team. jonesworks had handled Johnson's personal PR as well as that of his production company, Tequila Brand Clothing Company, and business partner, Danny Garcia. This was a big loss for Jones, and one that she kept under wraps from the media in order to leverage opportunities for other clients. In the following months, Jones was also dropped by Bezos, Sanchez, Lainey Wilson, Chris Hemsworth, Wheels Up, Ocean Spray, and Partake Foods. And at what point does Stephanie Jones supposed to analyze herself and wonder what's going wrong, isn't it really? And that is the thing. They're almost a perfect match, really, aren't they, Blake and Stephanie Jones? They're on a very similar wavelength. That thing of it, no matter what the evidence, it's always somebody else's issue and they're the victim, and they're not, but your average person at some point would be thinking, what am I doing wrong? What's happening here? You would be questioning yourself, but not the likes of Stephanie Jones and Blake Lively. In fact, if anything, you up your game in terms of victimhood and blame towards others. Through it all, Abel remained loyal to Jones, sticking with her through thick and thin, despite growing doubts about Jones's ability to function professionally. And it is an aspect of narcissism, too, that, for most people, living Stephanie Jones or Blake Lively's life, even setting aside the money and the fame and the rest of it, you wouldn't want to physically inhabit that space. You wouldn't want this stress on your life day in, day out. But when you're a narcissist, it doesn't matter whether it's good energy or bad energy, it's all feeding that inner maniac or whatever you want to call it. It's like the hungry demon inside that it's just all energy. There's no bad and no good. It's like the old thing about publicity. There's no such thing as bad publicity. It's the same about energy for a narcissist. All they want is this friction, this division, this whatever it may be. So by 2024, however, Jones had become increasingly embittered and hostile towards Abel. And it would have been like, the thing is, Jen Abel's like a beautiful girl, isn't she? And it seems, from what we know, we get the sense that she's light, not like an angel, that's the wrong, but like she's a bit set apart, isn't she? If she is like a friendly, helpful, kind of universally liked kind of person, somebody like Stephanie Jones, somebody like Jen Abel is very, very triggering, especially if she's smart and capable and magnetizes people and clients to her, and you gets on with her teammates, and has empathy going on with her team and is clearly liked and respected. Whereas on the other hand, you've got Stephanie Jones, who clearly isn't any of those things or considered those things. So it's natural for somebody like Jones to try and tear down somebody like Abel. So Jones frequently criticised Abel's management, manifested extreme paranoia about Abel's close relationships with clients and partners, and went out of her way to reprimand, demean, and embarrass Abel in front of junior employees she oversaw. Over time, Abel's concern about Jones' spiral, her obvious downward spiral, was heightened by the reality that there was no bottom in sight. In the final months of Abel's tenure, Jones had become even more erratic, clearly not sleeping, calling at all hours of the night in a frenzied state, senselessly pitting her own employees against each other, focusing her energy on catching employees in perceived acts of disloyalty, lowering morale still further, and torching her relationships with remaining jonesworks clients. Although Jones had always been volatile, she now appeared to be actively unraveling. Abel was frequently on the receiving end of often bizarre outbursts. In one instance, Jones announced to Abel's subordinates that she had learned through psychic readings that Abel was an alcoholic and a gambling addict. Even if these statements were true, Jones' public announcement would be, at best, highly inappropriate. Here, however, the accusations are not remotely true. They have literally no basis in reality, and the employees to whom Jones made her pronouncement were well aware of that. While Jones presumably intended to undermine Abel's credibility, she had actually significantly undermined her own and raised alarm about whether Jones was in the midst of a mental breakdown. On a different occasion, Jones announced, again per her psychic, that Abel would soon be pregnant with twins, humiliating and infuriating Abel, who Jones knew had struggled with fertility issues. So that's a certain kind of cruelty, isn't it, really? And it is to try, because it is to try and demean somebody in other people's eyes, because even when we say absolute nonsense about somebody, there'll always be somebody for whom that is a question mark against that person, the person accused of certain things, not the person delivering it necessarily. There will always be a question mark, even when somebody says something fairly ridiculous about you, and it does put you in that position of having to defend yourself against ridiculous nonsense that shouldn't even be a factor in your life. Abel was also disgusted by Jones's pattern and practice of creating fake social media accounts to troll former employees and journalists she deemed hostile. There it is, including Puck's Matt Baloney. So Jones was obsessed with Baloney in particular. Abel also witnessed Jones working with journalists to plan and contribute to negative stories about former JonesWorks clients who had fired JonesWorks and Jones. When Abel requested that JonesWorks offer its Los Angeles employees a modest 2% cost of living raise, Jones, who spent obscene amounts of JonesWorks money on lunches, champagne, and manicures, told her that if that were to happen, it would have to come from Abel's paycheck. Already pushed to the brink, Abel finally had enough when Jones demanded she corroborate falsified accusations about a senior JonesWorks employee in an effort to drive him out. When Abel refused to go along with it, Jones responded with mockery, calling her a 12-year-old drama queen. So on or about July 10th, 24, Abel notified Jones of her departure from JonesWorks. Abel later confirmed her decision on July 26th and communicated her intention to start her own business. She offered a 6-week transition period ending August 23rd, which JonesWorks accepted. On August 7th, Abel contacted Jones's chief of staff, Gordon Duran, to coordinate the release of her phone number, as Jones had promised when Abel had first joined JonesWorks several years before. Duran agreed, stating, and that's blanked out there, Jones and Jones, I wonder if there was somebody else involved there, another name or something. Jones and JonesWorks knew that Abel had used the same phone number since high school and used the phone for both personal matters and business. She used the phone to exchange personal text messages with friends and family, personal photographs, and confidential financial data. And this is another kind of thing, really, because we will often say this when it comes to something. Well, they knew this about me. They knew that about me. They should have. And again, it's like self-protection thing. Just assuming because you said it to them over and over again that they know that thing, will act on that thing, will support you in that thing, whatever it may be. You can never guarantee that with another person, especially somebody you're dealing with in business. You've got to remember that certain people just turn on a dime. And I don't like to say this because I do like to think about the idea of anybody being able to change at any time, but most of us cause our own problems in terms of not protecting ourselves, of thinking that if we stand behind our rights and tell people that we want our needs met, that somehow that makes us a bad person, or we're asking too much, or we're overstepping. And it comes back to this thing about being worried about being liked. And I think Jen Abel has been a victim of this, and I might be being unfair to her, but take it as what we just read from this document, and in the knowledge that we don't know the whole story about what other actions she may or may not have taken. At no point during her tenure did Abel consent to allowing jonesworks to access, review, or monitor the contents of the phone. jonesworks did not have a policy in place giving it the right to do so. Abel's willingness to let jonesworks port her personal cell phone number to its Verizon phone plan when she joined jonesworks was predicated on her reasonable expectation that she would retain sole and exclusive access to its contents and her private data and accounts. Had there been any reason to believe otherwise, Abel would not have agreed to the arrangement. In early August 2020, and again, it's that thing of the airy-fairiness of it. And I don't know if the law, if Lyman, she'll come a cropper of that. The law doesn't like you assuming anything, does it really? It likes things in writing and rubber stamped and a chain of evidence, a chain of emails, whatever it may be. In early August 2024, Jones directed Durant to investigate how to gain access to Abel's text messages and call history on her telephone from jonesworks provider Verizon. Durant was only able to obtain Abel's call and text logs for the prior 6 months. So that's bad, isn't it, really, to investigate how to gain access to her text messages and such. Jones instructed Durant to make sure that Abel could not port her phone number away from the jonesworks plan without jonesworks permission. I'm imagining these are things he's tested because he has been deposed, this guy. By mid-August 2024, Jones had hatched a plan to seize Abel's phone outright. She sent Durant to California on August 19th and set the plan in motion. So on August 21st, 2 days before Abel's last scheduled day of employment, Durant, a security guard, a forensic data technician employed by Edgeworth Security, and an attorney with Frankfurt, Koenig, Klein and Salz, confronted Abel at jonesworks Beverly Hills office to terminate her jonesworks employment early. So I'm assuming these were all men, I imagine, as well. And I don't mean that as in a sense of bad men. I just mean I would imagine Stephanie Jones made it as intimidating as possible to be a woman alone facing a bank of men in authority or deemed to be in authority. Jones had insisted on a security presence so they could, whatever. Durant later testified that, so that will be in his deposition. During the August 21st meeting, Durant demanded that Abel hand over her phone and provide her passcode. In a ruse to induce Abel's compliance, Durant falsely claimed that jonesworks needed the passcode to facilitate the release of the phone number and reset the phone. And again, it's like another light bulb moment, isn't it? Where it should have clicked on in somebody's head if they were in a position where they could think clearly, that weren't facing like a wall of oppression, whatever you might want to call it. It would trigger something in your head. Passcode. You want my passcode. If you were in your right mind, I think you'd realize that they didn't necessarily need the passcode while she was there, because it's quite simple, isn't it, to get your pack number or whatever about porting the number. It's, as long as somebody's there with the phone with it open, You just send a text to get your pack number, don't you? It's like, well, it's what you do over here. So, believing Duran's representations and intimidated by the presence of a large security guard, an attorney, and a forensic data technician, Abel complied with the demands. And I think this is what we're seeing. There's so many instances along the way where if any one action was different, this whole lawsuit would not be what it is, because Blake wouldn't have got her hands on this stuff. There wouldn't have, it'd have been dead in the water, wouldn't it? Abel did not consent. So this is why Stephanie Jones is really quite liable for a lot of this. And it's not dismissing Blake out of that, because she met her match. They were on an equal wavelength, as I've said. But it is, as we've, suspected all along, it's heavily down to Stephanie Jones and this hatred she has and this everybody's against me attitude kind of thing, this need for vengeance and comeback and all of the rest of it. Abel did not consent to and was not asked to consent to a search of the iPhone's contents. Abel had no reason to believe jonesworks would attempt to access her personal data, or she would not turn the device over without making prior arrangements to secure it. And again, it's like, can you put yourself in this situation and imagine turning over your mobile phone to somebody and giving them the passcode to it, knowing that your online banking was on it and all of the rest of it? It's an interesting thing, and it's hard without knowing exactly what she was facing and such, and why she kind of succumbed to this in a way, isn't it? Or didn't say, I need to call somebody or get somebody here. It's like she's capitulated a lot. And really, what could they have done if she'd have stood her ground and walked out with a phone? Were they going to physically manhandle her? I'd have like, I think if it had been me, and it's easy to say when it's not happening to you, I would have called the cops. I think that would be my thing. If I felt threatened, but it's like Jen Abel seems to have looked at it entirely as a business kind of thing and has been almost telling herself this is normal in order to cope with it, is what it feels like. So she kind of saw and received express confirmation from Duran and jonesworks' attorney that her phone number would be released immediately thereafter, but she'd no real cause to believe these people in truth. After handing her iPhone to the jonesworks' attorney, Abel was escorted out of the office by the security guard. Abel went directly to a nearby Verizon store and called Duran with the Verizon representative to coordinate the transfer of her phone number. Duran told Abel that jonesworks had commenced the transfer and would call back. After 4 hours of waiting, Abel left the store in panic and despair. She never heard from him again, and jonesworks never released the phone number. You see, this is where, and I guess we don't know if she has. I guess we do know that she didn't call the police. But to me, at this point, somebody's in effect stolen your phone with all of your financial and personal information on it. My thought at this point would be to involve the police, whether they could do anything or not to get something on record. Now, whether this is around about the time that attorneys had been consulted, haven't they, in this case, and were kind of, I think at this point advice had been sought, or it was round about this date, wasn't it, that they were starting to seek legal advice as to in case it went forward or anything. So whether she was being advised not to involve the police, Jen Abel, at this point, I don't know. But if this was me, and if I was on my own, there's no way I wouldn't have taken this to the police. That's just me personally. Through their promise to, especially when it was involving all this inconvenience, and I was worried about, my finances and all of that. Through their promise to release Abel's number upon her August 23rd departure, jonesworks had lulled Abel into a false sense of security, believing she had 2 days remaining. Abel had not taken any steps to remove her personal data and information from the iPhone. When she arrived at the office on August 21, she did so with a fully loaded personal iPhone, logged into all of her accounts, registered to her iCloud, and containing all of her photos, text messages, and emails. And again, this to me is lacking a sense of protection to yourself. And when I say this, I'm telling you as someone who's been guilty of it, who's knowingly put things off thinking, oh, it'll be all right and I'll sort it whenever, or, they won't do this or they won't do that. It'll work out okay. We tell ourselves all of this stuff all of the time. But the truth is, in a way, she should have been well ahead of the game on this one. She should have had a new phone ready to go. And because by now she knew what kind of person she was dealing with. So in a way, just taking this document at face value without knowing what else Jen Abel potentially may or may not have done or what information she'd been acting upon. To me, this is a bit living in la la land, just wishing and hoping for the best and assuming that somebody like Stephanie Jones would miraculously treat her better than she had everybody else. And like I said, we can all be guilty of this, and it's important to flag these things up, I think, because us good people, us good sweet people who try to be agreeable all the time, we really occasionally need a wake-up call about protecting ourselves, and being ahead of the game. But because sometimes you just don't know, you know who you're dealing with, but you also tell yourself that they're not what you think they are. You don't trust your instincts, By refusing to release Abel's phone number, jonesworks usurped Abel's digital identity and cut off her access to critical accounts. So all of this is because you're a nice person, protected by two-factor authentication. As a result, Abel lost access to bank accounts, utilities, insurance, and virtually every other sensitive account. In effect, Jones had orchestrated a wholesale theft of Abel's phone number and personal data. And I guess it's a wake-up call as well to all of us not to have all of our stuff in one place. Not to necessarily tie all of our cards to our accounts, not to necessarily have an app that's for your bank or what. Spread your things around. Don't tie anything to any one device or any one password and all of the rest of it. So, in effect, Jones had orchestrated a wholesale theft of Abel's phone number and personal data. It took months of endless phone calls and in-person visits for Abel to regain access to her checkings and savings accounts, credit cards, investment and retirement accounts, as well as her internet, gas and electricity accounts. In fact, Abel still does not have access to her 401k account. She also lost 20 years of contacts, including those of her old friends, former clients and colleagues, and extended family. Abel had to reset all her airline loyalty, rideshare, and food delivery accounts. You see, the thing is, they could have done anything here, couldn't they? They could have hosted a party or anything if they'd have been of a mind to. It just shows you how vulnerable we all can be when we assume somebody else will look after our best interests. And that's my wake-up call to you here. Not to go around assuming that everybody's going to do you dirty, but just to remind you that you have a duty to yourself to protect yourself from things that may happen. So she had to do all of that, and for each social media account, Abel had to go through an arduous identity verification process. In short, it was a nightmare. In contrast, Jones gained unrestricted access to everything stored on Abel's phone, her text messages, emails, and personal photos. Jones could read her communications with her fiance, parents, friends, everyone, to ensure she would retain Abel's data under any eventuality. And something has happened there. So steps were taken there. So she must have spread it around or maybe printed something out or something or other. The next day, using her new phone number, Abel begged Duran and Jones to relent. So here's the text messages. Steph Gordon, this is Jen Abel, my new cell. I'm writing you both as a personal plea to please release my cell phone number. This is the same number I've had since high school. This isn't a work-related thing. This is my personal number that is linked to all of my bills, my medical, Chris's dad's living facility, all of my personal emails and accounts, and due to two-factor authentication, I can't access anything. Gordon, you wrote me numerous times you were going to release this, and then when Verizon was calling you during the 4 hours I was there yesterday, you never picked up. They said you never even started the process after you told me you did. The lawyer I was ambushed with yesterday even said this was fine to do. I've been nothing but good to you both, but this is just mean and egregious, and I'm begging you to please release it before I travel tomorrow. Please. You have no use for a 904 number that has been my personal number before you took on the billing. It takes one phone call, please. And there's a praying hands emoji there. But you see, that is where I would have involved the police. There would have been that little. Yeah, I'm a bit of a justice demon. So if I'd been sat in that Verizon shop for 4 hours and somebody had hold of my phone with the passcode and everything open, I'd have come out swinging, I think. But I guess we don't know what advice she was getting from elsewhere as to all of this. But you see, there would have been a joy, wouldn't there, to Steph Jones in receiving this kind of message, because it's just the delight in the pain that she was clearly causing Jen Abel. I mean, that would have been entirely delicious to Steph Jones. You know what I mean? Can you imagine if Justin Baldoni had have had to compose a begging email, like begging text like this to Blake Lively? What joy she would have taken from it, what that feeling of control, isn't it? After usurping control of Abel's private communications, Jones began exploiting them to harm Abel further. Specifically, Jones scoured Abel's text messages to find instances where Abel had privately been critical of or gossiped about any former jonesworks colleagues and shared them with those individuals and others. As a result, Abel saw long-term professional and personal relationships fracture. So Jen Abel had messaged somebody here saying, just know that whatever she is telling you guys about me or what I've done, it's not true. I've enjoyed working with you both and wish you nothing but the best. So that's 29th of August. And the response from a former colleague, unfortunately, your company phone says otherwise. So it's clear that Stephanie Jones was spreading it all over the place. And whether that person saw the phone or not, but Stephanie Jones could relate anything with any spin on it that she liked. And we all know we talk about each other on our devices and say silly things that we don't necessarily mean, or when we're, releasing stress or whatever it is, we all do this thing. We shouldn't do, but we all do it. jonesworks senior executives were positively gleeful as they watched Abel's closest colleagues turn against her. And that's the thing, isn't it? These bad actors, they do love it when the person that seems like the light and the joy is, there is that thing of people take satisfaction in that, don't they, in tarnishing sometimes what is good and right and true. And we've all seen instances of that in our life. You know how a bully tries to turn down the good, to do that to the sweet kid with the cute hair and the thick spectacles. You know what I mean? That's this little bit of light and joy in the world. The bullies just love to see it. They love to tarnish something that seems to be pure and capable and bright and joyful. Among the communications reviewed, discussed, and disseminated by Jones and her cohorts were highly intimate messages between Abel and her friends about their sex lives. So there's something there. This exchange, along with many others of a similar personal nature, are no longer in the exclusive possession, custody, and control of Abel and those she intended to communicate with, as they should have remained. Instead, they were widely distributed by Jones to her team, to Lively, to the press, and to untold others, and ultimately bait-stamped and captured for posterity in this and the related litigation. Also stolen by Jones were Abel's communications with her long-term partner and fiancé, as well as her parents. You can imagine how this feels, can't you? These include discussions between Abel and her fiancé about Abel's fertility, and between Abel and her parents about her mother's serious health challenges. They've all got a case here, haven't they, really, against her? Some of these messages, which Abel does not even have due to the theft of her phone number, were produced by jonesworks in this litigation. So she didn't even have them. Stephanie Jones had stuff that she didn't have that has now been used against her. Reams of other sensitive messages were excluded from jonesworks document production, but clearly are, or at least were, in Jones' possession. This cannot be reasonably disputed, given that Jones directed her digital forensics team to copy Abel's phone in its entirety which they did, based on the evidence thus far in this case, Jones closely, even maniacally, inspected these materials. Oh, I'm sure she loved it. I'm sure she was sat there with a bottle of wine, poring over this stuff for hours. In so doing, Jones attained unvarnished visibility into the most sensitive and private aspects of Abel's life. She was kind of living vicariously through Jen Abel's life, wasn't she? It's like experiencing somebody's life, isn't it? It's a very creepy thing, really. It's somebody like adopting your life for a little bit, isn't it? Just completely immersing themselves in your life and taking on your persona in a way for a while. Her fertility struggles, her fiance's father's neurological decline, and her financial situation. Jones also obtained all of Abel's personal photos, which ran the gamut in subject matter, but were almost invariably not intended for the consumption of Jones, Lively, or any other hostile actors. Not only did Jones steal communications of a personal nature, but she also stole privileged communications between Abel and Jessup regarding Abel's new business. Jones did so knowing full well that Jessup was Abel's attorney. So, in sum, Abel was subjected to a boundless and disgraceful invasion of her privacy by Jones and jonesworks. She has been left aghast, humiliated, and terrified. Having torched Abel's privacy and dignity, Jones started boasting internally that Abel's business would not last long. So, for almost 4 years, Abel largely managed jonesworks work for Wayfarer and Justin Baldoni out of its LA office. Over time, Abel developed a close, trusting relationship with Baldoni, Wayfarer CEO Jamie Heath, and the rest of the Wayfarer team, particularly as their strategic communications needs around It Ends With Us became increasingly complex. At all times during Wayfarer's 4-year engagement with jonesworks, Abel was the point person on the account. It was very clear to Wayfarer, and Jones largely did not hide, that Jones considered them to be a lower prestige client and devoted her attention to clients such as Jeff Bezos and Tom Brady. But jonesworks was in utter turmoil by July 24. Already bleeding clients and personnel, Jones learned that Business Insider was working on an unflattering story about her set to be published sometime in August. So she felt that her reputation had been severely damaged by the Stephanie Jones Leaks website and social media accounts. Jones was desperate to keep her remaining clients under control, really, I guess more applicably. At the time, Wayfarer and Baldoni were in the midst of a massive PR crisis as news stories began to trickle out speculating about possible tension between Lively and Baldoni, in brackets mainly due to the cast no longer following him on social media, just as the film was about to premiere. Jones started participating in meetings, calls, and written correspondence to reassert her authority over the account and convey her engagement to Wayfarer. Wayfarer and Baldoni asked Abel to recommend a crisis management specialist after consulting with Jones, who had no viable ideas, because she has no connections of a friendly nature, does she? She has nobody within her circle that she respects and would say, oh yeah, you can do a better job of this than I can, because she hasn't built up those kind of relationships, I very much suspect. Abel recommended 3 firms to help navigate these choppy waters, one of which was Melissa Nathan's The Agency Group. Abel had particular confidence in Nathan as they had worked together extensively in connection with the different jonesworks clients. So this is how women build up respect for each other, isn't it? You work with each other and you recognize each other's strengths. Stephanie Jones clearly was not doing that. Anybody else is a threat. So the need for crisis PR expertise was particularly acute due to Lively's demand that Baldoni not be permitted to attend the premiere and the threat that Baldoni would be excluded from the press junket with the rest of the cast. Abel learned during her initial discussion with Nathan that per her media contacts, a negative story was already being shopped around to multiple outlets, positioning Baldoni's religion as a cult, which we know that Jamie had to deal with. It was discussed on the Steve Sarowitz recording, and accusing Baldoni of having fat-shamed Lively after he asked her personal trainer in private about her weight due to his history of severe back pain. Even though Abel felt, and the thing is, Justin Baldoni may have been told by a doctor, do not lift anything that is over such and such weight. So it may be a very specific question. You know, a lot has been harped on about is, was it an overstep or something, asking about her weight? But because he may actually have a physical number whereby he's being told not to attempt to lift. So it might have been as simple as that. Even though Abel felt strongly that Nathan was the right choice, she knew that Jones would be unhappy with the recommendation. Jones viewed Nathan as a competitor and had a history of bad-mouthing her to anyone who would listen, including to Nathan's own clients. Out of sensitivity to these considerations, Abel advised the Wayfarer team to remain open to other possible options and to decide after meeting Nathan themselves. And that, in essence, tells you a lot about Jen Abel, doesn't it? Because even at this point, she's trying to protect Stephanie Jones' feelings, and she's trying to be fair and open-handed and say, you might come up with somebody better yourself. This is who I think, but you don't have to go with them. You know, I don't think you could ask for much more. Abel feared backlash from Jones, but felt strongly that Nathan was the best option. When Jones learned that Wayfarer was considering retaining Nathan, she was furious and immediately lashed out at Abel, pressuring her to disparage Nathan as a demonstration of loyalty to Jones. After initially pushing back, Abel eventually relented after Jones called her crying and screaming and engaged in some light disparagement of Nathan to placate Jones. Jones then attempted to derail the engagement and exploited confidential client information to dissuade Wayfarer from moving forward with Nathan. While Heath, Wayfarer's CEO, acknowledged Jones' position, he told her Wayfarer would make its own decision after meeting Nathan. I think the more we hear about Jamie, I think the more you kind of like him, because he seems like he's really kind and nice, but he's also like very on it and organized, and he's firm. I really get the sense. I really kind of like Jamie from what I hear of him. We almost feel like we know Jamie, I think, almost more than Justin at this point. Jones inserted herself into the mix in early August 24, seeking to box out Nathan and Abel. The problem, however, was that Jones had chosen not to pay attention to Wayfarer leadership's communication strategy or internal decision making, having long claimed to be too busy with higher profile clients. Wayfarer was fine with Jones' disengagement, as Abel was their trusted advisor, and they had no interest in being a pawn in jonesworks' office politics, because this is what we know about Wayfarer. They're not interested in gossip and speculation and he said, she said, and creating that negative energy. In addition, Jones chose to take a lengthy vacation in Europe during this critical period of the press campaign and premiere of the film. Even from afar, Jones' efforts were ham-fisted, unwelcome, and sporadic, given her distance from Wayfarer's day-to-day business. I mean, there's nothing worse, is there, in life, than somebody saying, oh, this is this and that is that, yet they've done no research and not been on the ground floor of something, but yet they pronounce a judgment on it. As Jones tried to stir up drama and undermine Abel's authority, Wayfarer and Baldoni focused solely on managing the crisis at hand. Notwithstanding Jones's general disengagement, it is not true that she was kept in the dark. To the extent she was out of the loop, it was by choice. Jones was copied on virtually all communications during this period and was privy to Wayfarer's predicament and its chosen strategy of non-confrontation. Had there been a smear campaign, as was later alleged by her and the Lively parties, Jones would undoubtedly have known about it in real time. She couldn't have not been tagged in it somewhere or other, or discovered it in some way, could she? And so that we've got something here that's blanked out that she's admitted in an email on August 21st, 2024. So at the time, God, how far are we? Sorry, it's running so long. At the time, Lively's and Baldoni's team had negotiated an uneasy truce in which neither side would participate in negative coverage of the other. Lively's team had already broken that truce, but the Wayfarer team did not know that then. As far as they were concerned, it was best for Baldoni, Lively, and the film if both sides agreed to keep the peace. The Wayfarer's team had to date been acting only defensively in responding to press inquiries. But on August 8th, Jones, in another desperate attempt to reinsert herself, contacted a Daily Mail reporter about a story they had published about Baldoni and Lively. She did so in direct violation of Wayfarer's instruction not to talk to the press, given the truth with Lively's team. Nonetheless, Jones bragged to Wayfarer about trading calls with the Daily Mail in an effort to appear engaged on the account. Nathan and Abel were left to deal with the fallout. This blatant disregard of Wayfarer's strategy sparked a chain of unfortunate developments. Sloan and Sony learned that purportedly someone from Baldoni's team had been communicating negatively to media. It's blanked out again. When Wayfarer's leadership found out, they were livid, as was Sony. All parties were desperate to prevent an all-out slugfest between Lively and Baldoni, just as the film was about to be released to the world. With her reckless and unauthorized activities, Jones had made that scenario much more likely. In response, Wayfarer instructed Jones to cease all activities on its and Baldoni's behalf for the time being and to let Abel and another Los Angeles-based jonesworks employee, Matthew Mitchell, handle the crisis alongside Nathan. At this time, Nathan started hearing from other journalists that Sloan was planting negative stories about Baldoni and was under the impression that Baldoni's camp had broken the truce. I mean, I don't think she needed much excuse, did she really, Leslie Sloan? Anxious Sony executives began reaching out to Wayfarer seeking clarity. Yet Jones, panicked about being blamed, refused to be sidelined, insisting that she needed to contact Sony's and Lively's PR teams to clarify that she had not planted any negative stories about Lively. Heath told her not to do that, to which Jones responded that she could do whatever she wants to clear her name and that Wayfarer could not stop her from making calls. Desperate to salvage her reputation with Lively and Sony, Jones emailed several key Sony executives working on the film to declare that she was in Europe with her husband, partner at WME Jason Hodes, and to place all blame on her team. In her attempt to save face, Jones ruptured her relationship with Wayfarer and Baldoni. Although Jones ultimately agreed to stand down, Wayfarer and Baldoni expressed that they had lost all trust in her. After parachuting in for self-interested reasons, nearly blowing up the truce with Lively's team, and lashing out when told to stop, Jones became a magnet for drama when it was least needed. As September drew near, Wayfarer and Baldoni, with the assistance of Abel and Nathan, continued their tireless efforts to promote the film, put out fires, and see the project through to the finish line. Stewing in jealousy towards Abel and resentment towards Wayfarer Baldoni, Jones clearly saw the writing on the wall. Knowing she would soon be terminated, Jones started taking steps transparently intended to make it harder to cut her loose. Those steps included sending email after unwelcome email to Heath and others long after their relationship had irrevocably ruptured, to lay the groundwork to contest that she had been detached and non-responsive for years. This was especially galling, as Jones had been in Europe and largely incommunicado, save for a few texts of support to Baldoni prior to the premiere and then her disastrous efforts at self-preservation for weeks during the critical month of August when the film premiered. In contrast with Abel, who was loyal, trusted, and even-tempered while working around the clock through the crisis, Jones was a walking disaster whose self-absorption, disloyalty, and insubordination had become a significant headache. Rather than accept the end of the Wayfarer relationship with professionalism and decorum, Jones started threatening to sue. So you can see Stephanie Jones is a woman who completely lacks personal accountability. There's nothing that she has done that is ever wrong. She was demanding exorbitant payment for work not done and protesting that she had done an amazing job. Jones stewed in resentment and indignity. Unable to bear the loss of another jonesworks client, she set out to take revenge on Abel, Wayfarer, Baldoni, and Nathan. Jones disclosed at least some of Abel's private communications to the Lively parties no later than August 21st. Sloan, Lively's publicist, confirmed as much to Nathan on a phone call that evening. Despite lacking Abel's consent to access, review, or disseminate these communications, Jones and Jonesworks were able to do so without difficulty, because with the iPhone in hand, they could bypass the password protection that would otherwise bar their access. On or about August 24th, Jones took things a step further and attempted to contact Lively directly through a mutual connection. A few days later, Jones again reached out, and it's blanked out again, then connected Jones and Lively directly. In advance of the call, Stephanie Jones has done something or other. Reeling from a storm of negative publicity, Lively instructed that. Lively and Jones spoke by phone approximately a week later. A few days later, Lively followed up with, it's blanked out again. However, it is now well known that Jones transmitted the contents of Abel's iPhone to Lively, who in turn disseminated them more widely, including to the New York Times. It's kind of appalling, isn't it, really, as if we didn't know. While the contents of Abel's communications do not support the existence of an untraceable smear campaign, they do show that by the time of the film's premiere, Abel and others in Wayfarer's circle held Lively in deep disdain and vented acerbically amongst themselves, as they had every right to do so, really. These sentiments were the natural result of the Wayfarer Party's first-hand knowledge of Lively's vicious behaviour and malignant persona, and the high-stress situation in which they found themselves. I mean, can you imagine how Blake loves that malignant persona thing being reiterated over and over again? In turning over these materials to Lively, Jones knew full well how they would be used, with slicing, dicing, cherry-picking, massaging, and in some cases outright alteration, such as emojis being moved and such removed. The Lively parties exploited Abel's text messages to great effect. Joining forces with the New York Times, the Lively parties commissioned the hit. However, for different reasons, the Lively parties on the one hand and jonesworks on the other hand needed to create a veneer of legitimacy. The Lively parties likely anticipated, or were told directly, that the New York Times would not traffic in stolen communications under these circumstances and needed the colour of law. Jonesworks, for their part, wanted to insulate themselves from legal exposure to Wayfarer for breaches of confidentiality. And I think this idea of thinking that they'd get away with the Van Zandt of it all, the sham subpoena, I do think it kind of reiterates that they never expected this to go this far. They expected that Justin and team would cave, or they'd pay them off. They'd settle or whatever it may be. They really didn't expect to have Van Zandt exposed and all of this, for sure. Accordingly, on September 27th, working hand in glove with Jonesworks, the Lively parties and their counsel at Manat, Phelps and Phillips initiated a sham legal proceeding in New York State Court. And at some point, I'm pretty sure we're going to see sanctions, surely, for that. Sanctions for a real thing would be nice at this point, wouldn't it? And the number of it is there. The sham lawsuit was nothing more than a transparent ploy to obtain subpoena power. The plaintiff, Van Zandt Inc., is a corporate entity affiliated with Lively and Reynolds and entirely unrelated to the film or the Wayfarer parties. The lawsuit asserted three causes of action: breach of contract, breach of the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing, and faithless servant, against Doe defendants only. It does not explain how or why Van Zandt was unable to identify the proper defendants, which is especially notable in the context of a breach of contract action, because you know who you're in a contract with, don't you? Instead, Van Zandt, Lively and Reynolds, and Manat implausibly claimed not to be privy to the identities of its own contractual counterparties or its own employees, contractors, agents, or representatives. The lawsuit is devoid of specific allegations against anyone, much less Abel, and relies exclusively on boilerplate legal jargon. Notably, Van Zandt never requested the assignment of a judge, substituted the Doe defendants for named parties, or served the complaint on any defendant. The only docket entries are the complaint and a notice of dismissal filed on December 19th, 2024, the day before Lively filed her CRD complaint against the Wayfarer parties. The same day the lawsuit was filed, September 27, 2024, Jones warned a departing employee not to work for Abel because her business wouldn't be around much longer. Once the lawsuit was filed, the Lively parties used it to issue a subpoena to Jonesworks for data stored on Abel's phone, including troves of private emails and text messages picked up via the application of highly generic search terms. The information turned over to Lively included communications that were plainly protected by the attorney-client privilege. Since there were no identifiable parties and no party had been served, The subpoenas were issued without notice, depriving Abel of any knowledge of the subpoena, much less the opportunity to object. Abel is informed and believes, and based thereon alleges, that the sham lawsuit was contrived by the lively parties and Jones, acting in concert to facilitate and cover up Jones' release of the data extracted from Abel's phone and personal accounts under the guise of legal process, without risking detection by interested parties such as Abel, who could have intervened to stop the flagrant abuse of process. As planned by the parties upon receipt of the sham subpoena, on or about October 1st, Jones and jonesworks blithely surrendered the entire contents of Abel's iPhone communications for a second time, creating a veneer of legitimacy and affording Jones and jonesworks plausible deniability once the New York Times came through for lively. And if you remember, the New York Times said it poured over thousands of pages of stuff in that article. And at the time that bothered me because you think, well, what thousands of pages did they possibly have? Was that? But it's like, was it every single damn thing from Jennifer Abel's phone? Wouldn't that be interesting to know? You know, it's time somebody asked the New York Times, isn't it? What is this 1,000 pages of stuff you had? It is on this pretext that Jones and Jonesworks counsel later described responding to a court-ordered subpoena. See Tatiana Siegel et al. How did Blake Lively's lawyers obtain bombshell text from Justin Baldoni's PR team? Blah, blah, blah. That's a Variety article. As a result of Jones's malicious scheme, Abel's life has been turned upside down. Her career and reputation have been destroyed. She has been publicly humiliated, really. I mean, just knowing that at any time, at any moment, somebody in power with a lot of money could leak any aspect of your private information in any way they choose. I mean, that's horrific, isn't it? So her email inbox and social media pages filled with a daily stream of death threats and abuse. She has watched her client list evaporate and the viability of her once promising business cast into doubt. Abel lost control of a long-time phone number and along with it access to her most sensitive accounts and decades worth of contacts. Only after months of chaos and hundreds of calls with untold numbers of customer support representatives did Abel restore some semblance of order in her life. The backlash against Wayfair and Baldoni has been equally devastating, with Baldoni wrongfully labelled as a sex pest, his accolades rescinded, and his future projects thrown into doubt. You could have a little cry, couldn't you? I feel myself tearing up when you hear that, because it's quite a lot. Oh God, I'm a right sensitive sod lately, I don't know. In an unimaginable invasion of Abel's privacy and dignity, Jones possesses and controls the full contents of Abel's iPhone, including her text messages, emails, and photos. Abel lives in fear of what is to come, given the vast troves of personal data in the possession of this hostile and vengeful actor, and the hostile and vengeful Lively and Reynolds as well. As a result of Jones and Jonesworks' tortious conduct, Abel has suffered enormous harm to her personal and professional life. All of this harm is accrued in the state of California, where Abel lives and works. So I'll give you a break. We won't. But I don't think we particularly need to go through all of that. It's all the cause of action. But I mean, you let me know what you think, but I think it's incredibly compelling. I think the only things I can say is to take it as a warning to yourself as well, to always put your own needs first and to act on that gut instinct. You know, one of the things that I really advise people about healing your trauma, one of the important reasons why you should always work on your own healing is that when you shift all of the nonsense out, I don't mean that was the wrong word, nonsense, because whatever's happened to you is not nonsense. But what I'm saying is the weight of all the beliefs you've made about yourself. Once you shift all of that out of the way, it allows room for your intuition to come back online. If you've been heavily traumatized in your life, you've possibly lost trust and faith in your own intuition. And that needs room and space to grow. Does your intuition? So you need to clear out a lot of the stuff that's happened to you in your life, and work on trusting your intuition and noticing those signals that tell you that something is off. And I think it'll be interesting to see where the judge goes with this, because I think I don't know how the law works in this instance, because to me there are some things that he will say, well, yes, this happened, but you didn't protect yourself. It's like the minute you knew that you didn't have access to your iPhone, it's like it may be a question, why weren't the police involved? Because clearly that's what this is, and it's like what I've said, for some time, that I think Line of Friedman and that they will try and make this um a punishable crime, not just a civil matter. They will, I can't, the right word's gone out of my head, but like a penal code crime is what I'm trying to say. So, whatever the correct word is, it's not about civil issues anymore. This is literally people breaking the law, and stealing people's information and the financial information and all of the rest of it. But I don't know how it will go in terms of the judge say, because we all have to protect ourselves. We all have to prioritize ourselves and listen to these warnings and these red flags. And, this is how we get ourselves in these severe circumstances, is that we don't listen to our intuition, or we overrule it. You know what I mean? So many people have been subject to something terrible happening to them because they ignored a gut instinct they had. They told themselves they weren't in the right mind, or they were overreacting, or whatever it is. And next thing, something, pretty bad has happened to you, or a set of circumstances that were pretty bad have happened to you. And I think that's what we see throughout this document, that in trying to be nice, in trying to be fair, in trying to appease both sides of something all of the time, you're often doing a disservice to yourself. And again, it goes back to that thing of, it's a much healthier thing in life to comfortably live with the idea that not everybody likes you, because it will serve you better. And you should always be putting yourself first in terms of making you safe and secure on this planet. We all think we should be helping everybody, and we should be, but we have to remember to help ourselves first, because if we don't help ourselves first and make sure we're okay and we're safe and we have what we need, then we're not fit and well and healthy enough to be giving from our cup to other people. You know what I mean? And I Jen Abel, to me, I mean, she'll have said stupid stuff, and stuff that she regrets, I'm sure, in a lot of those messages, and maybe stuff that she said about her colleagues and what, but we're all guilty of doing it. But I think overall, we get the sense that Jen Abel is a nice person who was trying to be all things to all people, and to keep the boat in calm waters, or whatever it, and she was like between a rock and a hard place. Although I don't think Wayfarer was either a rock or a hard place. I think it was the problem with Stephanie Jones in its entirety, wasn't it? But there are numerous opportunities where she'd have put her foot down and not worried about being liked and not worried about repercussions. And, because people like Stephanie Jones can be intensely scary, and the threats that they put on you, but often they don't have teeth when you push back and you get the right help, and you involve the police, or you involve an attorney, or you insist on having your needs and your rights met. There are people in life, and Blake is the same, that they would be better people, and they would have experienced nicer lives for themselves if more people had pushed back against them along the way. Because it's only in the knockbacks and the difficulties and the not getting everything your own way that helps you develop as a personality, isn't it? And I think what we're seeing with Blake and with Stephanie Jones is that people live in fear of them and let them get away with things time and time again. So that only builds up in people's minds then, that you can't win against these people when really they're still people at heart. You know what I mean? We need to push back against people wherever we can when it comes to making sure our own needs are met. And this is why I knew it was going to go long, but why I thought it was important to go through this document and just to highlight what can come when you just try to keep everybody. You know, I mean, that's it really, isn't it? When you're trying to keep everybody sweet, be liked by everybody, you know, you're often not thought that well for it. You're often put on this pedestal just so that people can hurl stones at you, you know, and be glad when you're knocked off it and the rest of it. Even people that seemed like they liked you at the time will often turn against you in light of the fall from grace, won't they? So it's better really to be, you know, to intimidate people a little bit and to have people not quite know how you might respond to something. You know what I mean? To not just say, oh, just go ask so and so because they're a bit of a pushover, they're a bit of walkover, they'll do it for you. Remember to say no more often. That's what I'm saying here. Thank you for watching. If you stayed to the end, and drop me a comment if you feel so moved to what do you think about it all. And I will see you later.